Some voices are hidden behind laughter. When Kristen Wiig walked onto the Tonight Show stage with that quirky smile and endearing awkwardness that had made her one of comedy's most beloved chameleons, nobody expected her to reveal the most touching secret of her post-SNL career. Jimmy Fallon had planned a fun interview about Kristen's latest film. The audience was ready for the hilarious character impressions and spontaneous comedy that always came with a Kristen Wiig appearance, but what Kristen was about to confess would silence Studio 6B and prove that sometimes the most important performances happen not on television, but in therapy rooms where children learn that their voice matters. The cameras were rolling. The audience was already charmed by Kristen's magnetic quirkiness. And then she spoke 10 words that changed everything. Laughter unlocks voices that fear has kept locked away. What came next wasn't just television. It was a revelation about silence, courage, and the sacred power of comedy to heal what trauma has broken. Kristen Wiig had always been known for her transformative ability to become other people. The sketch comedian who could disappear completely into characters, who found truth through exaggeration and humor through vulnerability. But what audiences didn't know was that Kristen's gift for voices and characters had been born from her own childhood struggle with finding her authentic voice, and that struggle had awakened a calling to help other children discover that their silence could become their strength. The improv therapy sessions had begun 6 years earlier, during a particularly reflective period when Kristen was transitioning from SNL to film work and questioning what she wanted her comedy legacy to be. After reading about selective mutism, a childhood anxiety disorder where children can speak normally at home but become unable to speak in certain social situations, Kristen had been struck by how similar the condition was to her own childhood experience of feeling voiceless in many situations. I was this incredibly shy kid who could be hilarious and animated at home with my family, but put me in a classroom or social situation and I'd completely freeze, Kristen later explained. I understood what it felt like to have words trapped inside you, to have a voice that only certain people were allowed to hear. Selective mutism affects roughly 1 in 140 children, most commonly manifesting when kids can speak freely at home, but become completely silent at school, in public, or around unfamiliar people. Unlike shyness, selective mutism is a complex anxiety disorder that can severely impact a child's social and academic development if left untreated. These kids aren't choosing to be difficult or stubborn, Kristen said. They're experiencing paralyzing anxiety that literally prevents them from speaking. But here's what's beautiful. They often have incredibly rich inner lives, vivid imaginations, and natural comedic instincts that they can't express through traditional communication. Kristen's first encounter with a selectively mute child had been through a friend whose 6-year-old daughter, Emma, had been diagnosed with the condition. Emma could speak normally at home but hadn't spoken a single word at school in 2 years, despite being bright, creative, and desperate to connect with her classmates. I met Emma and immediately recognized something familiar in her eyes, Kristen remembered. She was studying me so intently, taking in every facial expression, every gesture. I could tell she was this incredibly observant, funny kid who was trapped by her own anxiety. During that first meeting, Kristen had begun doing simple character voices and facial expressions. Nothing elaborate, just silly voices for Emma's toys and exaggerated reactions to everyday objects. Emma had responded immediately, not with words, but with laughter, facial expressions, and physical comedy that revealed her natural comedic timing. Emma couldn't speak, but she could communicate, Kristen explained. When I did a funny voice for her stuffed elephant, she started moving the elephant in ways that were absolutely hilarious. She was performing, creating comedy, expressing her personality, all without saying a word. That breakthrough had inspired Kristen to research selective mutism treatment and discover that traditional therapies often focused on gradually encouraging speech through behavioral techniques. But Kristen had realized that her approach of using comedy and character work might offer a different path, helping children find their voices through performance rather than pushing them toward conventional communication. Working with speech therapists and child psychologists, Kristen had developed an informal program she called Character Voices, weekly sessions where selectively mute children could explore communication through improv, character work, and comedy without the pressure of normal conversation. The sessions aren't about forcing kids to talk, Kristen explained. They're about creating a space where communication can happen in whatever way feels safe. If a child wants to express themselves through puppet voices, silly walks, or sound effects, that's valid communication. We build from there. Over 6 years, Kristen's Character Voices sessions had reached 47 children with selective mutism, ranging from age 4 to 14. Each child's journey was unique. Some gradually incorporated words into their character voices. Others found confidence through physical comedy that eventually translated to verbal communication, and a few discovered that their selective mutism was actually protecting creative gifts that needed different forms of expression. I worked with this 8-year-old boy named David who hadn't spoken at school in 3 years, Kristen recalled. But when we did robot characters, he found this incredible mechanical voice that felt safe because it wasn't his voice. Slowly, David's robot voice started having conversations, expressing emotions, even telling jokes. His teacher said it was the first time they'd heard him communicate at school. The approach worked because it removed the pressure of normal social interaction while providing structure and safety through character work. Children could hide behind voices and personas while still expressing their authentic thoughts and feelings. When you're doing a character voice, you're not responsible for the words the same way, Kristen explained. If the silly robot says something embarrassing, that's the robot's fault, not yours. It creates this protective distance that allows kids to take communication risks they couldn't take as themselves. The emotional impact on the children had been remarkable. Parents reported increased confidence, improved school participation, and most importantly, reduced anxiety around communication. Many children who completed Kristen's program were able to transition to more traditional social situations while maintaining the confidence they'd built through character work. There was this girl, Sophie, who came to me when she was 10 and hadn't spoken to anyone outside her immediate family in 4 years, Kristen remembered with obvious pride. Through our sessions, Sophie developed this cast of characters, a brave princess, a silly monster, a wise old grandma. Each character could express different parts of Sophie's personality that she couldn't access as herself. The most profound transformations happen when children realize that their unique way of seeing and expressing themselves wasn't a deficit, but a gift that could bring joy to others. Sophie's breakthrough came when she performed her characters for her class during show and tell, Kristen said. Her classmates were amazed by her voices and creativity. For the first time, Sophie's selective mutism led to something positive, recognition for her artistic abilities rather than concern about her silence. Tonight's appearance on The Tonight Show was supposed to focus on Kristen's latest film, a comedy that featured themes of finding your authentic voice and embracing your quirks. Jimmy had planned to discuss her character development process, maybe get her to do some improvised voices, definitely tap into the spontaneous creativity that made her such an entertaining guest. The interview had started with Kristen's characteristic charm and humor. She had shared funny stories from her film's production, demonstrated her approach to developing character voices, and delighted the audience with her ability to transform into different personas within seconds. But when Jimmy asked about how she developed such a gift for voices and whether she'd always been naturally outgoing, something shifted in Kristen's expression. The question had been meant to explore her comedic evolution, but it had touched on something much more personal that Kristen had been considering sharing publicly for the first time. You know, Jimmy, Kristen said, her voice taking on an unusual vulnerability, I wasn't always good at using my voice. Actually, I spent most of my childhood feeling like I didn't have a voice at all. The audience grew quieter. sensing that Kristen was moving into territory that was more personal than her usual playful responses. "You seem pretty outgoing on SNL," Jimmy said with genuine curiosity. Kristen was quiet for a moment, her usual animated energy replaced by thoughtful reflection. "Performing taught me that I could find my voice through other voices. Characters felt safer than being myself, and that understanding led me to work with kids who face an even more challenging version of what I experienced." The studio was completely focused on Kristen's words now, the energy shifting from entertainment to something much more meaningful. "What do you mean?" Jimmy asked softly. Kristen's eyes filled with tears, a sight that was particularly powerful, coming from someone known for making others laugh. "For the past 6 years, I've been working with children who have selective mutism, kids who can speak at home but become unable to speak in school or social situations because of anxiety." The audience was completely silent now, witnessing a side of Kristen Wiig that transcended her comedic persona, the raw empathy of someone who had transformed her own struggles into healing for others. "Jimmy, can I tell you about something that's become the most meaningful work of my life?" Kristen asked, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. "Please," Jimmy replied, clearly understanding that something profound was being shared. Kristen took a deep breath and spoke directly to the camera. "I teach improv and character work to kids who can't speak in certain situations. 47 children over 6 years, helping them find their voices through comedy when traditional communication feels impossible." Jimmy's expression changed completely as he grasped what Kristen was describing. "You're doing therapy through comedy?" "I'm creating spaces where communication can happen without pressure," Kristen replied gently. "These kids have incredible creativity and humor trapped inside them. When they can express themselves through character voices and silly performances, they discover that their voice matters." Tears were streaming down Jimmy's face. "Can you tell us about one of these children?" "Emma was 6 when I met her," Kristen said, her voice becoming tender. "She could talk normally at home, but hadn't spoken a single word at school in 2 years. Teachers thought she had developmental delays, but her mom knew she was brilliant and funny, just terrified." Kristen paused, gathering herself to continue. "I started doing character voices with Emma's toys. She couldn't speak, but she could laugh. She could move the toys in hilarious ways. She could communicate through physical comedy. We built from there." "What happened to Emma?" Jimmy asked through his tears. "Emma is now 12 and thriving," Kristen said with obvious joy. "She found her voice through a brave princess character who could say things Emma couldn't say as herself. Now she performs in her school's drama club and wants to be a voice actor. Her selective mutism became the foundation for her artistic gifts." The audience was openly emotional, many people crying as they witnessed this revelation about Kristen's private ministry to children struggling with communication. "Kristen, how has this work changed your understanding of comedy?" Jimmy asked. "It's taught me that laughter isn't just entertainment, it's healing," Kristen replied with quiet conviction. "These kids showed me that comedy can unlock voices that fear has kept silent, that sometimes the most important performance is the one that helps a child believe their voice matters." As the segment concluded, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio audience rose in sustained applause that lasted over 4 minutes. But it wasn't just appreciation, it was recognition of something sacred, acknowledgement that they had witnessed creativity transformed into therapy. Kristen's revelation became one of the most shared Tonight Show segments in the program's history, bringing national attention to selective mutism and inspiring other performers to explore how their skills could serve children with communication challenges. Most importantly, Kristen's disclosure had shown that sometimes the most important voices aren't the ones that speak the loudest. They're the ones that help others find the courage to speak at all.